This week on the Tech on Tap podcast, we talk about all that ONTAP 9.3 goodness with the Powered by ONTAP crew, Jeff Baxter and Octavian Tanase.
Welcome to the Tech on Tap podcast with Justin Parisi, Glenn Sizemore, and Sully the Monster.
I love Netapp.
Oh, yeah.
Hello and welcome to the Tech on Tap podcast. My name is Justin Parisi. On the phone with me today, Mr. Glenn Sizemore. Hi.
How are we doing, Justin?
I am doing great. I am ready for the next wave of insight at EMEA. When we're going to be doing it in Berlin in a few weeks. You're not going to that, are you?
No, I'm not. But I'll be supporting it back here at home. We've got 2 busy weeks, man. We got a big launch, and then right around the corner, we got our second half of the show.
Will you be pouring out a beer and eating a Wiener Schnitzel for us?
If by pouring out you mean drinking, then
pouring into your mouth, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. All right, great. So this week we're going to cover ONTAP 9.3 because that was announced in Insight Las Vegas. And to do that, we're going to start off by talking about innovation. And we brought a very special guest onto the show, Mr. Octavian Tanase. Hi, Octavian.
Hey, Justin. Glad to be on the show. And I know that this is a podcast, but Jeff Baxter and I dressed for the occasion. Both of us are wearing a Netapp blue T-shirt that has a hashtag powered by ONTAP. I thought you'd like that.
It's pretty good, and they actually did it by video. So we do the WebEx for remote people, and they have a video going now, and it really reminds me of those ads where the grandparents are trying to talk to their kids through the video conferencing. So it's cute. You guys are cute.
Yes, thank you for that. I'm not that old. I have high mileage. But anyway, you wanted to talk about innovation, and I couldn't be prouder of the team. I think the ONTAP team is innovating with more pace and passion than ever before in the history of the company. And ONTAP 9.3 that we recently launched is yet another iteration of that innovation engine that we're so proud of. To be honest, the themes of innovation should be familiar, right? And on top of everybody's mind. When you talk about security, performance, efficiency, and simplicity, these are things that most of our customers are looking forward to get into a product. So security seems to be top of mind for everybody in IT. You can't go a week without realizing or reading that security has caused yet another resume-changing event, and those events are usually not promotions. And we in the ONTAP team, keep on innovating and adding capabilities such as multi-factor authentication, or enabling, the software encryption of a data in a controller in a deployment. So our customers have that peace of mind of having the data secure both at rest as well as in flight. Another area that we're very passionate about is performance, and we're looking to always optimize software performance. So customers are getting additional performance, especially for SAN mission-critical applications, just by upgrading to ONTAP 9.3. Right? We're not talking about upgrading to a different set of hardware, but just via software upgrade, we're looking at 30 to 40% more improvements on the SAN stack.
It's like the second or third time that's happened now.
Yes, the team has really been at work, and you've seen us publish a series of benchmarks that are world class. We're really proud of that, and the team has been hard at work.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make any sense to upgrade if you're not going to get anything out of it, right?
I think it always pays off to upgrade, and we've done a lot of work to make that simple, right? Something that started as a vision a few years ago has led into a lot of progress that enables our customers to really upgrade within minutes a deployment, whether it's a simple HA pair or a cluster. I think if you haven't seen that capability in System Manager, I would highly encourage you to look at that.
Yeah, the thing that impresses me, and sometimes we forget, those of us who have been here for a while, we have a whole bunch of net new customers now, right? Whether they're coming from competitors or otherwise, and they may only have known us 9.0 on and seen these releases coming out every 6 months. So, sometimes it's useful to look back. Like when I joined, right, we were lucky. We said maybe every 18 months, and in reality, it was like every 21, 22 months. And there were these, good releases, but they were these big bang releases with hundreds of features, hard to implement, hard to upgrade, right? And sometimes even with regressions on performance or efficiency or something like that. And over the last couple of years, what the team has really done is have these 6-month, cadence. When it's coming. It's easy to upgrade. It's free. It's non-disruptive if you have support. And instead of degrading your system or whatever, you're getting more performance, more efficiency just out of a software upgrade. I think that's pretty cool.
Absolutely.
That's Jeff Baxter. In case you didn't know, we didn't really announce.
Oh, sorry.
Him. Hi, Jeff.
My bad.
That's all right. So, Jeff, one of the things that we're talking about here is innovation. I think it's pretty innovative within Netapp that we've gone from this cadence of 18 months per major release to 6 months. Could you talk a little bit more about what that means to the product itself?
So I think what that means, and I'll get Octavian's take on it as well, right, is it means that from the time an engineer comes up with a brilliant idea, it doesn't always, get into the code in 6 months, right? But you've constantly got people working on it. There's constantly a new release train coming that when features are ready and when they demonstrate the quality necessary, then we're able to ship, right? So you have some incredibly talented, whether individual contributor engineers or senior TDs who come up with these brilliant ideas, right? Work with customers, work with product management, right? And are able to accelerate them a lot quicker to value that customers can actually see in their data centers. That's part of it to me.
Absolutely. And you'd be surprised how few of the good ideas actually come from senior management. What happens is, teams always want to do things faster and better. And they've implemented a DevOps model where they've shifted a lot of the testing left, as early to the code inception and code development. So we have a very modern way to building and releasing code right now. We have a lot of continuous integration tests that are being run with every single check-in that has enabled us to really accelerate our software development, software QA process.
We wouldn't release probably more often. Never say never, but to enterprise customers in their data centers more often than 6 months. But we have full builds of ONTAP going a lot more rapidly than that, I think, right?
We have daily builds. And one of the things that we're experimenting with right now is for the newly announced NFS as a service in the Azure infrastructure service, right? That is powered by ONTAP, powered by Netapp. For that, we're looking to release on a monthly basis.
Oh, wow.
So we may have some code lines that get spun up, and then they'll converge and loop back into the main code line on a monthly basis.
So that may be a news flash for you and the podcast listeners, Justin, that for Azure, we're looking at monthly builds of ONTAP.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's quite a scoop we got. But we already do that kind of with Select. We do every 3 months for releases.
So for Select right now, the deploy tool, the deploy capabilities of ONTAP Select get iterated every 3 months. ONTAP Select ships on the same cadence as the rest of ONTAP.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, as I've said many times in this podcast before, I think that makes perfect sense, right? It depends on where you're deploying, how often you want to have to go in there and do an update, right? If we're dealing with a core data center infrastructure, doing upgrades once a month is a bit excessive, even when the cluster handles it all yourself. But in a pure cloud service, well, yeah, Netapp should be pushing those updates as fast as we can because the customers don't have to deal with that. We do.
Yep. And that's what I love about our model, right? And with the long-term support model and different things like that, we adopt different enterprises, right? I ran an enterprise data center, and I don't know, 10 years later, maybe I would update every 6 months, but we have customers who update annually, very conservative customers who might want to wait, maybe the 18 months again. But we have customers, and we've seen pretty rapid adoption of these releases, even every 6 months. With if you make it easy, if you make it non-disruptive, and you add more performance and efficiency, we're seeing customers actually adopt rapidly.
Yeah, the customers vote with their downloads and their wallets. And you probably know that ONTAP 9.1 is the most adopted release in the history of Netapp, in the 25-year history of Netapp. Well, But I want to talk about the present and what we just shipped, because we just covered a couple of topics. We talked about performance, we talked about security. What we didn't talk about is the improvement that we made in the area of storage efficiency. And that is important because your customers are always interested to improve their cost of ownership for the solution that they deploy. And what we've been able to do is innovate and develop IP in that in the storage efficiency area and in the area of reducing the footprint of the data on in the storage device. So in ONTAP 9.3, by employing a broader domain of deduplication, many of our customers will see an improvement of up to 30% for their storage efficiency. We're really proud of that. And, once again, the team in Bangalore that is doing that work has outdone themselves.
These savings, are they seen more on AFF or are they seen across the board, across FAS as well?
You would see these savings across the board. What we usually do is lead with these capabilities available first on the all-flash arrays, where the cost of ownership is perhaps even more important and more sensitive than for hybrid storage.
And one of the things with 9.3 that it added was one of my personal favorites is not having to schedule your background deduplication runs. If there's data that's moved on there, snap mirrored on there, that maybe was not caught inline, right? Being able to not have to schedule them, but have the system dynamically run when there's resources available. And obviously we made that available first on AFF because the performance there and the guaranteed low latency means that there's ample headroom essentially to be able to do these jobs in the background while dynamically adjusting to load. So that just, in addition to being able to expand the dedupe scope, the ability to just basically catch any of that other data and be able to dedupe it without having to schedule a whole bunch of jobs is huge.
All right, this is simple. It's becoming simpler than ever to turn these capabilities on. Yep. Now, that's probably also a good segue in the last theme of ONTAP 9.3, which has been simplicity. We've invested a lot over time in enabling a simpler and a faster out-of-the-box experience. And with ONTAP 9.3, we are deploying a capability called Adaptive Qos. And it basically complements some of the capabilities that we've launched in the past that enabled administrators to set up floors and ceilings for the workload. Now we have the capability to automatically adapt the quality of service given certain parameters to give you a burst mode. Last but not least, a product that is near and dear to my heart, the MetroCluster product is now available not only for fiber channel networks, but for IP as well. I believe that this capability will democratize sync DR across customer data centers, and overall, one is able to deploy this solution, this DR solution, with less cost. Both the one-time, the capex cost, as well as the recurring cost of running it over the network. So MetroCluster over IP is starting to ship in on ONTAP 9.3.
Yeah, and just to point out, this is a limited release for that particular technology. You're going to want to check with your field guy or your sales guy or the technical reports to figure out which use cases are supported for the initial release. But eventually we should see more support for things.
Yeah, Justin, you have to say that really, really fast, like that lawyer guy from the commercials. MetroCluster IP and ONTAP 9.3 is available in controlled release. Please check with your local representative.
I can speed it up in post. I can speed it up in post.
Yeah, exactly. You can just speed it up, make it go at 50, 80%. I like it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's in a controlled release just so that we can make sure that the environment you have, IP can be a little bit more Wild West, right? So just to make sure the environment is right, interconnects are right, and everything like that. But it's definitely, I like how you call it democratized, right? It's definitely the future that we're moving forward towards.
I think I saw Octavian give me a look when I said that. I think
this is the problem with having video.
I saw that.
That's a mistake. Hold on. We'll just do this. We'll just cover it up.
That works.
There.
Okay. That works. All right. So we talked about MetroCluster IP. We talked about the storage efficiency changes. One thing I wanted to mention about the storage efficiency changes for the scheduled deduplication as well as the adaptive QoS. These are all things that are building blocks, right? These are things that we've been building to in the releases prior. So we introduced things like Headroom. We introduced things like QoS in general. And then we started building on top of these features to make them more evolved and more innovative over the course of time so that we start to give you a more fully fledged, feature-rich solution for your product, right? So, I mean, I would expect to see more and more happen with these particular feature sets over the course of time in the next releases.
Yeah, and I think we're also learning how to evangelize and how to present, some of these capabilities in plain English, right? When you talk about, QoS, a lot of times in the past we used Netapp idiosyncrasies rather than simple plain language, and I think it's time for us to start doing just that.
Yeah, and I think you're just right with the building block analogy, Justin. I like, and by the way, I'll give you a cheap plug. I really like the session you did at Insight Vegas, and for anyone planning to go to Insight Berlin, the session on these updates and ONTAP was a great session at Vegas. So I encourage people to check it out. But I like you talk about them as building blocks, and we kind of talk about them as journeys, right? And so we know, especially on a 6-month cadence, but even 18 months, right? You're never going to get there on the first leg of the journey, right? But if each one incrementally delivers you enough value that you want to go there, and you start, and you can start there, and then each release, or maybe not each and every release, but on each of these journeys, each release, or maybe skip a release, you continue to increment until you go from, a minimally viable, good starting product to a complete, feature-rich solution in addition into the ONTAP, ecosystem. And I think that's pretty cool, instead of having to wait around for 18 months or 3 years for something to ship and then it's missing a feature and you got to wait another 18 months. I love these incremental journeys.
I think what you want to do is ship a minimal viable product, get some feedback, listen to your customers, and perfect that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've seen that things like Fabric Pool, right? Where there's honestly not that much that's changed in 9.3 on Fabric Pool, but part of it was you get a minimally viable product out there just 6 months after we announced it. In 9.2, you take all that feedback. I know we've refactored some of our plans there based on that feedback, and then you move ahead and you look at hopefully the next 6-month release and you keep going. So we announced on stage at Insight Vegas that one of the things we heard from a lot of customers was in 9.4, we're going to go ahead and add Azure in as well, right? So
absolutely,
based on customer feedback and based on demand, right? So I love that we can iterate on customer feedback and partner feedback a lot quicker than we could before.
You're telling me we shouldn't tell customers what they want? We should just listen to them?
Oh, I think there is a fine line between leading a customer in a direction that you have a lot of conviction about, as well as listening to them.
I like the even at Insight, right? It's a good mix, right? So I was running around doing sessions saying, here's what a whole bunch of thought leaders think about what's going on with next generation media and NVMe and all that other stuff that, to be quite honest, a lot of customers may not have heard about or had just heard about, and that's our jobs, right? We're here daily thinking about things like that. And then you have sessions like yours, which were, here's all the feedback we've collected from you, and here's all the awesome stuff we've released, and tell us more what we can do, right? So just like Octavian said, there's a balance, right? Sometimes we're going to try and skate to where the puck is, and other times we're going to say, well, we really missed that one. Thank you for your feedback, and go based on what customers are asking us for.
So Octavian had to leave us. He's very important, and he has more important things to do than talk to us all day. But we did get to keep Jeff Baxter, who is less important, but still important.
Yeah.
So, hi, Jeff.
Hi. Yeah, I forget where Jeff ranks on the org chart between you and Octavian. I'm trying to remember.
It's probably just not
anywhere important.
One giant circle.
Clearly.
I mean, circle of life, man.
Exactly. Right. Yep.
So we talked a little bit about some of the features in ONTAP 9.3. Let's turn around and start going a little deeper.
Sure.
And let's start with Adaptive QoS, because I know that's going to be something that a lot of people are going to be confused about initially. So let's go into what it is and how it works.
So, and I know there's some deep dives out there, and there'll be more deep dives, and there'll be videos online, different things like that. But at the core, Adaptive QoS, I think it's important to understand that Adaptive QoS is in addition to the QoS minimums and the QoS maximums that have been introduced over the last few years, with the minimums being introduced for selected workloads in 9.2. Adaptive QoS, in my thinking, is kind of just a different way of looking at things. And if you were to go with let's call it non-adaptive QoS, it's very reasonable. It's very sensible. You say, okay, I have this volume or whatever object you're placing it upon that I want to say at, maximum 100,000 IOPS, minimum of 25,000 IOPS, right? And that just makes sense. That's kind of as close to plain English as a storage geek can talk. The issue with that has always been that those limits are static compared to the change in how you're using that volume. So what I mean by that is, let's make it simple. Let's say you have a 100,000 max IOPS and a 10,000 min IOPS on a 100 terabyte volume. So when you put the first 10 terabytes on that volume, you're getting 100,000 IOPS for that 10 terabytes, and you're getting a minimum of 10,000 IOPS for those 10 terabytes that you've just put on the system, and everything's rosy and everything's happy and, sunshine, so on and so forth. Here's the interesting thing. If you then put the second 10 terabytes on it, 20 terabytes on there, right? If that workload represents users or represents applications, they've just cut in half effectively what you've given that volume. And if you scale that volume of at the end to that full 100 terabytes, right? Say you basically fill it up, you've now got 10 times the workload that you started with at 10 terabytes. So if you predicted exactly right that you actually needed a maximum of 100,000 IOPS and a minimum of 10,000 IOPS, you'd technically be okay. Although the odd thing is users who had been with you from the beginning, or applications that have been from the beginning, will actually feel like they're slowing down. Now, they're not getting, at the end of it, they're not getting less service than they were promised. But we've all had that feeling, or we've all had that experience where you actually get more than what you expected. Service happens quicker, or they tell you it's going to take 48 hours for something to happen, and it turns out it only takes 6 hours. And then it kind of feels wrong when it goes back to the norm. So you have that sort of weird expectation where users getting the experience they were promised, or an application's getting the experience they were promised, but it feels like it's slowed down because from their relativistic point of view, it actually has. The other problem that can happen is, remember I said, if you guessed right, or if you sized your application right, what happens if that application really should have had a minimum of 50,000 IOPS or a maximum of 200,000 IOPS? When the first 10 terabytes of that 100 terabytes goes on there, it's still going to feel okay. It's still going to perform okay because you've only got 1/10 the workload on there that you thought you'd have. But as it grows, and when it passes that 50 terabyte mark, all of a sudden the application's not getting the latency you expected. The users aren't getting the performance you expected, and everyone's complaining. And by that point, you may have passed the point of no return. You may have already provisioned so much more on that system that you don't know and you can't fix it. So that's a long build-up to what does Adaptive QoS do? Adaptive QoS fixes those problems by tying the amount of performance for the volume to the workload as it's growing. So you, instead of saying, I want this amount of IOPS maximum, I want this amount of IOPS minimum, with Adaptive QoS, at least to start with the maximums, right, and the minimums in some cases, you can go ahead and set the IOPS per terabyte I want. So you still set an absolute minimum, and that doesn't vary at the moment, but your peak actually goes up as your terabytes go up until it hits that maximum as the volume maxes out. So that means with each new workload as you're adding, with each new application as you're adding, it's getting a consistent increase in performance. And if you take workload off that volume, it's consistently decreasing that at maximum so that your IOPS per terabyte remains completely static. Long explanation, I know. I'm going to take a breath, but that's the easiest way I know how to explain it.
Oh, it's a great explanation, man. I mean, this is one of those controls where if you're a traditional IT pro, traditional large enterprise, you may be looking at that going, okay, maybe. You may not see the immediate need there. Those types of controls and capabilities really fall under the must-have category, though, when you start looking at building services and reselling capabilities out to customers. You have to be able to manage expectations, and you have to be able to control outcomes. And that's exactly what that adaptive system enables customers to do.
Yeah. I mean, this is nothing new, right? Going back 15 years when I was selling shares of a Novell NetWare server, right? Dating myself a little bit, right? The first couple of users we put on that server thought they'd entered nirvana, right? And by the time we got it up to 50% or 60% or 70%, we were getting screaming phone calls saying that it was slow. Even though according to the service catalog, they were getting what they deserved, right? So it's this great way of providing guaranteed customer service and aligning things the way they want. It's actually, and we talk about these themes, it's actually also an efficiency theme, because if you know that you have good controls on your workloads and good QoS, like you said, right, for large-scale service providers, you can run a cluster far closer to its maximum, right? It's a scary, when you have no controls, no idea how many IOPS per terabyte, it's really scary running a cluster above 50% or 70% or 80%, because who knows what'll burst out of the performance closet and wreck your entire cluster. Whereas if each one of those workloads is controlled, is provisioned, you can run your cluster at 80%, you can run your cluster at 90%. And so even though theoretically you're not getting any more storage efficiency or performance efficiency out of it, you really are, because you're able to use what you paid for to a lot higher utilization with confidence, right? So it's a huge efficiency boost. And like you say, for service providers where that's measured in large-scale clusters across hundreds of customers, that's real dollars. That's millions of dollars at stake.
Indeed.
Yeah, so this covers the simplicity aspect as well, because it does simplify how we're managing our QoS. But what it also does is it takes something we already had, which was the Adaptive QoS and Netapp Service Level Manager, and brings it into ONTAP natively, right?
Yep. Yeah. I mean, Netapp Service Level Manager is this awesome tool that can provision across multiple different instances, build your service catalog into it, work with all these orchestration frameworks. So there's a huge amount of focus there. But also for the IT generalist, just looking at System Manager, our basic GUI on the system, being able to go in and set these values directly, or more than likely, with sort of the recipes we have built in, say, I just want a generic SAN application, or I just want generic NAS, and I want one of these service levels, extreme or value, or any of these different built-ins, or you can put your own. So there's extreme, performance, and value, kind of built in based on what we've seen with best practices, but you can kind of roll your own in there. So whether you're building this enterprise-wide service provider thing through this service level manager, or whether you're just this IT generalist wanting to go in and assign basic service levels, we've got you covered, from the biggest down all the way to just straightforward provisioning.
Yeah, and we covered Service Level Manager in episode 81 if you're interested in hearing more about that.
Yep. Yeah, cool stuff.
All right, so you mentioned efficiency in terms of Adaptive QoS, but we're also doing some things with efficiency in 9.3, and Octavian touched on it a little bit, but let's go into a little more detail about what those new efficiency feature sets are.
Sure. So it's really about continuing to reduce your storage footprint, and what we've said, on the big line print, the big bubble on your presentations is, improve your capacity savings by up to 30%. And there's a couple different things with that. As a lot of people listening to this podcast probably know, in 9.2, we introduced this aggregate level dedupe. So aggregates are our collection of RAID groups, essentially, right? They're how we create a logical pool of storage. They can go out to now 800 terabytes on some systems, and which, by the way, I should point out, is actually bigger than the entire global size of some of our competitors. And I don't take shots at competitors, but just to point out, being able to dedupe across 800 terabytes and get 3-to-1, 4-to-1, 5-to-1 or more, and essentially have a dedupe across a couple petabytes of logical storage is pretty impressive without a performance impact. So we introduced that in 9.2, continue to refine in 9.3. And the other thing we added in 9.3 is this ability to then remove the need to statically schedule background deduplication jobs, and instead allow, starting with an AFF system, the ability to run this sort of constant automatic dedupe in the background. It knows what the performance of the system is like. It's not going to degrade the performance of the system, but with those extra CPU cycles that pop up, it's going to go ahead and run dedupe on the background for you, and run it only when the change rate of individual volumes indicates that there's enough data there for it to be worthwhile to run. So the performance impact, in almost all cases, you won't see any. It's going to be at least less than 10%, for all the storage efficiencies combined. In reality, it's probably something imperceptible enough that you wouldn't see in real life.
We talked about the efficiencies, not just in terms of capacity savings, but we also have things like automated schedules, as well as the deduplication and the aggregate level across aggregates after the fact, right? So not just inline, because with inline, it's opportunistic. And if we can't deduplicate something because it'll impact performance of workloads, we'll actually defer to the workload. Right. So we can actually deduplicate after the fact to gain those efficiencies because, we didn't get to do it the first time around.
Right. And there are, depending upon the size of your system and how much memory and things, so sometimes we'll defer for performance, and other times, if data is old and cold enough, maybe the table in memory just isn't quite big enough to have it, so we won't catch that on the inline. But this post process will come along and clean that up as well, right? So this is the way it is with a lot of different systems in the industry. There's never such a thing as a free lunch, right? So you get the vast majority of your storage efficiency right there in line with inline dedupe, inline compression, inline zero reduction, inline compaction, all of that going. But on the rare case where there is an escape because the system is running up against the edge or the data is so old that it's not in the memory map anyways, we have this automatic scheduler that comes along and reduces it for you.
So we've covered the aspects of adaptive QoS and efficiencies. We talked about some security enhancements in a previous podcast, podcast 109, episode 109. So if you want to just touch on those at a real high level, and then we'll move on to the next thing.
Sure. Yeah. So I won't say that was Juan, right? On that podcast on 109.
Yeah, Juan and Dan Tullidge.
Absolute experts on this. So I won't step all over that. I would encourage people to look at it, but at a very high level and near and dear to my heart, some people know, I started Netapp almost a decade ago, and I started in our public sector business. And it's still a huge, big part of our business. We're very proud that we're the number one storage provider to the U.S. federal government, as well as being a significant provider to other governments around the world. And we take that responsibility very seriously. So there were a couple different things building on these journeys. One is the introduction of multi-factor authentication for System Manager and for Unified Manager. A lot of people know what multi-factor authentication is. You may sometimes hear it referred to as two-factor. That's a variant of it, right? But it's generally something like a password, and something you have, like a token, whether it's a hard token or soft token or something else along those lines. So in 9.3, we introduced the ability for these different interfaces to use SAML. It's an industry standard to go out to an identity provider. And we've tested with a couple different ones, Shibboleth, the Microsoft Active Directory Federation services, to be able to go out there. Basically, you log in, it goes out over SAML. We don't do it for you because there's so many different ways of doing this multi-factor authentication. So we go with whichever way your enterprise has chosen. It goes out, it validates your token, whatever else you're happening to use. Obviously, we still validate your password through Federation services. And then we go ahead and provide you access. And this is for the administrators to access the system. It's very important to understand that, because what we're really trying to protect against is unauthorized administrator access, usually because of weak passwords or stolen passwords or spear phishing or whatever else that gets access to the what you know sort of piece of it. It can't usually get access to the what you have, your token or something else. So it's very important to protect against insider threat. And by insider threat, I mean someone who was supposed to have left the company or where their credentials got stolen. This will help protect your ONTAP systems against it. So that was very important. It's also very important, to be quite frank, because there's federal requirements that are coming into play very shortly that require systems to use it. So it's important, again, for us as important providers to that segment to provide this functionality. The other major security sort of enhancement was with Netapp volume encryption, which is our software-based encryption for at-rest encryption. We've been able to do hardware-based encryption for a while. In 9.1, we had the ability to do software-based encryption either, and you can actually technically do both, which is kind of fun, because just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you, especially for certain customers. But with NVE, it allows you to go in and encrypt with software. And where we went out of the gate with 9.1 was this onboard key manager to make things really simple, time to market, and for a lot of our customers, they just want to have something basic there. But other customers who want a more rigorous setup, we support the KMIP protocol. It's what we've supported with the hardware encryption. Now we support it with the software encryption. You go out to a key manager, and the key manager validates the individual key and unlocks those volumes for you. That means you can have central key managers. You could have usually 2 to 4 key managers replicating the keys for protection of the keys. And you can have multiple different clusters, multiple different instances of ONTAP, all using that central key management. And in a lot of cases, that central key management can be validated to FIPS standards higher than what you would get typically out of just ONTAP or any general purpose OS. So typically, say you get something from Gemalto SafeNet, their key secure, which can go up to FIPS 140-2 level 3. So just higher level of assurance for customers there, and 2 more features that show how serious we take authentication and security in ONTAP land.
Okay. And one thing we didn't cover with Octavian was something that I think is going under the radar a bit, is solid fire to ONTAP SnapMirror. So could you give us kind of a high level of that, as well as what sort of limitations we currently have?
Sure, absolutely. This is a big deal for us, right? You hear, we haven't talked a lot about on this podcast, but I think you always hear from Netapp this vision around digital transformation in the data fabric, and we're always trying to add these threads into the data fabric. And SnapMirror is our primary replication technology, and it's ubiquitous, right? It's deployed. I think it's still the number one replication software deployed out there. And we first sort of test drove it with AltaVault, adding SnapMirror in. Now with 9.3, and I believe Element OS 11 on the SolidFire side, you're now able to replicate data from a SolidFire system for backup purposes, for DR purposes, into an ONTAP system. And in the event of a disaster, you're actually able to mount those LUNs, temporarily run them off the ONTAP system. When your SolidFire systems come back online, you're able to then shut it down on the ONTAP side, do a resync back to the SolidFire side, and bring it back online there. So in terms of quick caveats there that you probably heard as I was going through this, it is currently a SolidFire to ONTAP and only running on ONTAP in the event of a disaster, and the replication back is only sort of a resync. We don't currently support the ability to replicate, LUNs that are active on the ONTAP side over to SolidFire. To be quite frank, that's probably not a good, never say never, but it's probably not the most likely use case because SolidFire is an all-flash system. People are usually using it to run virtual workloads or other new emerging workloads. Using it as a backup or DR system isn't probably as likely as people have an ONTAP system just sitting there already doing SnapVault, doing backup, plus the ability to do hybrid configurations or all disk configurations to lower the cost of data protection in these DR scenarios. So that's why it's kind of the way that it is today. Other things I should mention. So I believe, at the time of recording this, and by the time people hear this, Netapp HCI will officially have been shipping for about a week. And big news, I'm incredibly happy with my SolidFire teammates and our HCI teammates. Big accomplishment there. I think it's going to be a tremendous offering. And again, this plugs into it. So people will be able to, through that interface, establish a data backup relationship, have a DR relationship over to their potentially existing ONTAP system or another ONTAP system, and be able to do DRs for their system. So that say they go out and buy HCI for their virtual workloads, or maybe, perfect use case for virtual desktops, and they want to just back up that information, well, go ahead and back it up, SnapVault it to that ONTAP system you already have. So that's it in a nutshell, I think.
So, in following the theme of there's a podcast for that, we have Netapp HCI podcast as well, if you're interested. So episode 89, we covered that. So if you want to check that out.
If you put all the podcasts onto one ONTAP system, would they get significant dedupe rates,
I don't know. They might. I think I tend to say the same things over and over again. My jokes would get deduplicated. Definitely.
There's certain people around here where if you could dedupe the number of times they've said Netapp HCI over the last 6 months, you get like 100 to 1, maybe 900 to 1. It's a pretty big deal, right? So
yeah,
we're glad to do what we can to help with that.
Absolutely.
The one other piece with SolidFire that I should mention, and we've done this for a little while now with running ONTAP Select on vSAN and different places like that, we will be supporting running ONTAP Select on top of HCI, as well as things like the virtual AltaVault, storage grid, different things like that. So the whole data fabric portfolio running on this HCI system. So, I think that at first it's going to be kind of a manual deployment, but our goal is very shortly to have HCI and through that Netapp deployment engine that's built into HCI, be able to deploy things like ONTAP Select automatically there. So the great part about Netapp HCI is you get the second generation enterprise level, really awesome standalone HCI solution. If you want to use it just for that, that's great, right? You don't need anything else. But if you want to embrace the whole power of the data fabric and use things like object storage or use ONTAP for, home directories or enterprise NAS you might want on it, or putting AltaVault on it for cloud-based backup, that's all going to be available and it's all going to be deployable onto that platform. So the SnapMirror that we've introduced in ONTAP 9.3 is a huge part of the thread, and the ability to run all these other products on top of HCI is golden on top of it as well. So very cool sort of solution there.
I noticed you said second generation HCI. Am I to infer that you're referring to other HCI solutions as, I don't know, legacy?
Legacy is such a loaded term, Justin. Just I would never say such a thing. No,
we had a pretty strong stance on that a year and a half ago. We
Absolutely
probably shouldn't.
Oh, I agree. I was
just saying.
I was more poking fun at the whole term of legacy because legacy in itself is a loaded term. Okay, never too shy to plug my own stuff, but Flex Group also has new stuff in ONTAP 9.3. And I'll just go through a quick rundown of the list of new features that are added in ONTAP 9.3. So Qtrees, antivirus support, QoS ceilings, SnapVault support, independent version snap mirror support, so being able to replicate between multiple versions of ONTAP with Flex Group. And a new feature for the ingest calculation, so basically taking into account inode counts per member volume to avoid situations where we will build up files in a member volume and potentially run out of inodes in a member to balance the load a little better so we don't have capacity problems or member inode problems.
Man, that's a lot.
That is a lot. It's a pretty big payload for 9.3. We didn't have a ton in 9.2. We had MVE, and we had some GUI feature functionality added, as well as aggregate inline deduplication support. But all this new stuff in 9.3 is a giant payload, so that's gonna be good stuff here.
Yeah, it gets back to what Octavian and Jeff were talking about earlier. I've always been a huge fan of the Mark Twain quote. Continuous improvement is better than delayed perfection. It just you tend to get it right when you take small bites and work your way through a problem. When you take huge swings, you just tend to miss a little bit.
I think Mark Twain would have been a TME.
Probably.
Because writing probably wouldn't have made him a lot of money now.
Yeah, I mean, look, if he was born in 2017, TME'd be a good job for that man.
Absolutely.
I could make a joke about lies, damn lies, and statistics in another department, but I won't do that because they're good friends. But yeah, I love that quote. That's exactly right, and I think that applies to Flex Groups as well, right? Flex Groups has just been one continuous series of not just how it's architected, right? Taking all the really cool stuff that we already did with FlexBalls, and instead of trying to recreate everything and recreate perfection, everything, expand upon them, right? It's that quote is deep, very deep, Glenn. It applies on so many levels.
That's why I love it, man.
Write it on my whiteboard. Yeah, I'm lost in thought now.
Hey, I got us off the track. I did it.
Yay, Glenn, derailed us.
Do you guys have a little award that you pass around when you completely derail someone?
Justin has a car crash sound that I tell him not to play because people listen to this in their cars.
All right, Jeff, thanks for joining us today. Octavian, of course, had to leave. If you want to reach Octavian, you can find him on Twitter at OCTAV Octav. He is the Senior Vice President in ONTAP. So, Jeff, what do you do here again, and how can we find you on social media?
I have one of those crazy social media titles. I'm the Chief Evangelist for ONTAP. And people can find me on Twitter. I'm fully brand compliant or not, at BaxOnTap. So it's BAX OnTap, all one word.
All right, that music tells me it's time to go. If you'd like to get in touch with us, send us an email to podcast@netapp.com or send us a tweet at Netapp. As always, if you'd like to subscribe, find us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Stitcher, or via TechOnTapPodcast.com. If you'd like to share today, leave us a review. On behalf of the entire Tech on Tap podcast team, I'd like to thank Jeff Baxter and Octavian Tanase for joining us today. As always, thanks for listening. So, Glenn, you gonna upgrade to ONTAP 9.3 after this?
Yeah, man, I am. I'm gonna go first. I gotta go smoke my my Netapp HCI cigar. We celebrated a birth the other day.
Yes.
I gotta go enjoy that. I think it's a boy, although I didn't actually pay attention to the wrapper.
Personally, I think it's androgynous.
You're probably right about that. No, I'll do what I've been doing lately, man. I'm just gonna go in System Manager, click the button, and let ONTAP do it. It's beautiful. I don't even have to think about it anymore.
So, full disclosure, I've been running it for months now because I kind of have to. But yeah, I like it. It's good stuff. Okay.
Justin approved.
Justin approved. Kid tested. Justin approved.